A boss be rising, baby TV's igniting. Turn the volume up, yeah, the whole world's invited. From the gravel roads to the neon dreams, she built an empire out of broken wings. Boss be rising, sky ain't even the ceiling. When she hits go live, everybody feels it. She's the queen of the comeback.
So, becoming a grandparent comes with a fascinating job description, I think. Love them, spoil them a little, make memories, send them home with something their parents specifically said they did not need. That part I understand. What nobody puts in the grandma handbook is what you're supposed to do when you're watching your own grown child parent and every ounce of experience you've collected over the years start screaming, "Oh, honey, I would not do it that way." Because suddenly you're standing between two instincts: protect your grandbaby and respect your grown child. And apparently, grandma is supposed to know which one wins.
Need advice? Ask a bee. The answers may not be perfect, but they'll be entertaining. Submit your letters and let Bee mind your business for a while.
All right, y'all, welcome back to Ask a Bee and our week of talking about life after our children become adults. Monday, we talked about helping without rescuing. Tuesday, we asked whether our grown children actually want our advice or sometimes they just need us to listen. Tonight, another generation has entered the conversation, and that changes everything. Because when your adult child becomes a parent, you don't stop being their mother, but now you're also grandma. You have experience they don't have yet. You remember the mistakes you made. You can sometimes see trouble coming from a mile away. But having experience and having authority are two different things. So tonight we're asking where grandma belongs when she disagrees with the way her own child is raising hers. It's a tough one, but we're going to get to it. And we do have a wonderful letter. Pardon me. Can't see my buttons because everything's crazy. All right. Dear B, I absolutely adore my granddaughter. And before I say anything else, I want to make it clear that I think my daughter is a good mother. She loves her child, takes care of her, and wants the best for her. But she also parents very differently than I did. And I'm discovering that being a grandmother requires me to bite my tongue far more often than I expected. Some of the differences don't bother me at all. Time change, parents learn new things, and looking back, there are plenty of things I probably would do differently if I were raising children today. But there are other moments when I watch something happen and every motherly and grandmotherly instinct in me wants to step in. Sometimes I think my daughter is being too strict. Sometimes I think she's letting something slide that needs to be addressed. Sometimes she's exhausted and overwhelmed, and I can see that the problem isn't really my granddaughter at all. It's that mom has simply reached the end of her rope. So, what makes it even harder is that my granddaughter has figured out that exists. If mom says no, occasionally she comes to me hoping grandma might have a different answer. Oh, I know that one. And I'll admit, there is a part of me that wants to give it to her. I'm grandma. Spoiling her a little feels like part of the job, but I also know what it feels like to be a mother trying to establish a rule only to have somebody else come behind you and undo it. I don't want to become the person my granddaughter uses to get around her mother. Amen to that, sis. At the same time, I want her to know that grandma is always a safe place. If she's upset, confused, or someday dealing with something she doesn't know how to talk about, I want her to know she can come to me. I'm trying to figure out how to be that safe place without becoming a second authority competing with her mother. The strangest part is watching my own daughter become the mother. I remember when she was the little girl testing my patience, and now I'm watching her deal with the same kind of moments from the other side. Sometimes I want to save her from mistakes I made. Sometimes I want to tell her this part doesn't matter nearly as much as you think it does. Other times I want to say, trust me, this part matters more than you realize. But maybe she deserves the same thing I had, the chance to figure out what kind of mother she is going to be. I agree on that one. So, where does that leave grandma? When you genuinely disagree with something your adult child is doing as a parent, when should you speak up? When should you offer advice? When should you step in? And when do you have to remind yourself that loving your grandchild doesn't mean get another turn at raising one? Signed, Grandma Has Opinions. Well, I'm glad, first off, that Grandma has opinions, honestly, because, I mean, yeah, opinions come from experience, most cases. Okay, so Grandma has experience, but Mom has authority, plain and simple. Becoming a grandparent doesn't erase everything you learned while raising your own children. In fact, you may see situations more clearly now because you're not exhausted anymore, or overwhelmed, or responsible for every decision 24 hours a day. You know which battles matter, and you pick and choose, and which ones you wish you'd never fought. You know, some mistakes, because you personally made them, them, right? That experience can be incredibly valuable, but experience doesn't automatically equal authority. Your adult child is now the parent. Their household has its own routines, values, rules, and consequences. The challenge is figuring out how to offer the wisdom you've earned, okay, without treating your adult child like they're still 16 and need mom to supervise their decisions, because that's not the case. We've talked about that all week. That is not the case. You know, being grandma is one thing, yes. Being being the authoritative figure for your grandchild is, it's just not possible. Sure, when they're with you, okay? If you want to go technical on me, let's be silly about it. When mom and dad's not around, you have complete authority. So you do how you did with some improvements, because, I was not perfect in raising my kids. And there are things that I would do differently now too. Well, now I can because I have a grandchild to do that with, right? Look, there is a difference between saying, here's something I learned, and saying, here's what you're going to do. Okay. That's the problem. Don't tell your child, well, this is what you should do. Just say, hey, this is what I did. You can take from it what you want, because that's the safe place right there for you and your child. They're going to make that final decision, and you need to let them. Being a safe grandma and being the loophole are not the same thing either. Okay. Every grandparent wants their grandchildren to feel like grandma's house is special. I'll be honest with you. I have one grandchild, and I know that my husband is her favorite, and I'm okay with that because, well, most of my kids were like that too. He was the favorite, but that's because, he's Bebop, or he was dad, and he just, sorry, my Beyonce's flying around. He worked a lot, so he didn't get as much time with the kids as I did. And it's kind of like that now too, except for vice versa, because I do more working since my husband had his heart attack. So, grandma's house is special, people's house, whichever. Maybe there are extra snacks, later bedtimes, silly traditions, or little privileges that only happen there. That's part of the fun. But there's a difference between grandma having her own special relationship with a grandchild and grandma deliberately overruling mom or dad. There's no place for that. And you know that. You wouldn't have let your parents do that to you either. If mom says no and the child learns that grandma's yes cancels it, not nice. Grandma isn't simply spoiling the grandchild anymore. She is accidentally teaching, well, personally, I think it'd be more intentionally, but accidentally teaching that child how to divide the adults. And children are remarkably talented at discovering that system. You have to give them credit for that, right? Being a safe place means your grandchild can bring you feelings, fears, and questions. It doesn't have to mean they get a second vote every time they dislike their parents' answers, right? I mean, you see the plaques that say, Mom says no, ask grandma, things like that. And it's cute, but it's not a good idea. It's just not. You want you want to learn from this instead of decide you're the authority figure in the whole situation just because you have more experience. There is a new thing to learn from all of this. You know, how well did you raise your child? You can see how well you did while they're raising theirs. You can see the things that they felt were okay, but they wanted to change from what they learned from you, right? It's a cycle, obviously. And you need to learn along with them instead of deciding that you know more because you don't. You're a grandparent, not a parent. That is a totally different situation. That's a totally different title and a totally different position in your family. Now, I learned right away that the best thing to do is talk to your children, ask them how they do it so that you can implement that into your situation when they're not around. Because ultimately, they're going to go home and that thing that was different at grandma's is not different at home. And that feels better for the parents. You're stepping on toes otherwise, as far as I'm concerned. If you do something that they specifically ask you not to do, honey, that is probably the worst thing you could ever do. And it's going to put a wedge between you and your children. You need to understand too that most of your children have spouses and they have families too. So everybody's going to know. And you just need to realize that if you want things to go smoothly, if you want them to hear you when you talk, then you need to listen too. You can't just tell them, hey, I'm here if you need me. You're not if you're not there to just listen. You're not if you're not there to learn their ways too, because this is how they want it done. It's their privilege. They went through that 9 months of hell to get here. It's their turn. Give it to them, right? So sometimes your adult child really doesn't need parenting advice. They just need support. When you watch your grown child lose patience with their child, your first thought might be about what they're doing wrong. But sometimes what you're actually witnessing is exhaustion. Maybe they haven't slept. Maybe money is tight. Remember back then? You had that time. Money was tight. Things were rough. People were tired. Work was awful. You know, they answered the same question 73 times today, and grandma happened to arrive for number 74. Instead of correcting how they're parenting in that moment, perhaps the more useful question is, what can I take off your plate? Can I watch the grandbaby for an hour, give you some rest, make dinner? I'd love to. Let mom take a shower without somebody knocking on the door. Sometimes helping the parent helps the grandchild more than giving parent another piece of advice. You know, I have one grandchild, so I have one son and a daughter in law that have this beautiful, beautiful little girl for me to love and care for. And one of the things that I am constantly saying is, you know, when your child goes to school, she has, she or he has two teachers for the rest of their life. And sure, they may have more than that later on, but I'm talking about the school and the home, the institution, so to speak. And when those two teachers, mom and whoever is teaching this child, don't talk, that child is suffering. If you cannot sit down and have a conversation with the other person that has the time with your child that you do, or even a portion of it, if you can't sit down and talk and say, this is how we're doing this, and this is how I want to do this, and do you mind, hey, can you help us out with this? There's nothing wrong with that. Just like today, my daughter in law sends me a text. Hey, I'm not going out with my friend today, which we were going to watch Baby Butt for a couple hours. Anyway, we'd already discussed it. But she says, I am so exhausted. And of course, the answer is yes, because we're not going to say no to our baby girl, and we're not going to say no to her mommy either, because we love them both and we know who we're helping in the situation. And sure, it's for us too. Okay. Because I'm not going to lie, I love this little girl with every bit of my being. She's amazing. She's smart. She's beautiful. I can see my mother and my husband's mother in her, and it's just amazing. And I want all the time to have her here. And I know I can't do that. I want all the time to be the one caring for her, but I know I can't do that either. And that's okay because she has parents that do that. But here's the cool part about this: I get to be grandma and I get to do what they need me to, even if it's for them with her. That's a privilege for me because I remember how hard it is to have kids. Hi, how you doing, Demps? Demps Jules, is that what it is? Sorry, I'm terrible with names, but I want to say hi to you. Thank you for being here. So you're watching your child become a parent, right? And that it can bring up your own past. Seeing your adult child raise children can unexpectedly make you revisit how you raised them. You may recognize things they learned from you. I mean, I've seen it with my son and his daughter. I've seen things that I would do that he does with her too. And it's pretty cool. Me and my daughter-in-law, we get to sit down and have those discussions, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm just want to know how you do this with her at home so that I can keep in step with you." That's the way it should be. And right now, those two teachers that I was talking about, that's me and her, because we have our granddaughter 3 days a week and then every other weekend. And it helps her parents just as much as it helps her. And guess what? It helps us too, because this is our first grandchild. And of course, she's spoiled. There's no way around that. Okay. But we also know boundaries. We also know that our children have boundaries for their daughter and we abide by them. That's the way it should be. Don't take that authority from your kids. It they'll feel like you're trying to override their authority and they're going to push you away. And that ultimately is the problem, because you don't want to be pushed away from your granddaughter or grandson. You may watch them do something differently and initially feel criticized, even though they never criticized you at all, right? Their choice to parent differently isn't necessarily a judgment of how you parented either. Okay. Every generation gets new information different circumstances, and another chance to decide what works for their family. Sometimes the urge to interfere isn't actually about the grandchild either. It can come from seeing our own parenting reflected back at us and realizing there are things we would change if we had another chance. But our grandchildren aren't our second chance. Maybe our second chance is being a different kind of support now. So I guess my real ruling here, okay, when does grandma speak up and when does grandma mind her business? Not every disagreement deserves intervention. Different bedtimes, food choices, screen time rules, discipline, styles, or household routines may simply be differences between generations. But there are also circumstances where staying quiet would feel wrong, especially if you genuinely believe a child's health, safety, or well being is being affected. So, where is the line? Does grandma wait until she's asked for advice? Does she privately raise a concern with her adult child once and then respect the answer? And perhaps the hardest question, when you're convinced you know a better way, can you tell the difference between a grandchild who genuinely needs your protection and grandmother who simply needs to accept that somebody else is the parent now? It's a hard reality. I'll be honest with you because I did have a hard time at first. I really did. When my granddaughter would be here and her mother would show up, and I needed to start shutting that down right then and there. That's when I had to stop being the authority as soon as her mother showed up. If there were times like she's rowdy a little bit when her mom gets here, which she is, 'cause she's excited to see her mama, but she will come in and she's all excited and she's jumping around and crazy and mom's ready to go. She's tired. She just got off work. She wants to go home and relax and make dinner and all that stuff. And then, she's acting a little crazy. So mom's already tired from work. I'll say something to her, but her mom is saying something to her. That's my bad. I stop. I stop myself because that's not how that's supposed to work anymore. Mom is here or dad is here. It's their authority. And if they are speaking, then stop. It's just polite, you know? Be polite. Give your kids the chance. I'm still going to say you need to let them make their mistakes. Otherwise, they'll never learn anything other than letting them learn by their mistakes is enabling them to do bad when you're gone. That's my opinion. I'm not a professional. All I am is a mother and a grandmother. Maybe becoming a grandparent isn't getting another chance to raise children, okay? It really isn't. Maybe it's getting a completely new role. We get to love them without carrying every responsibility. You know, like they say, I get to love them and give them back. Well, there's something to that. It sounds a little shrewd sometimes, but there's something to it. We get to offer experience without having to control every decision. We get to be a soft place to land, a keeper of family stories, an extra set of hands, and sometimes the person who has enough distance from the chaos to remind everybody that this difficult stage isn't going to last forever. And maybe one of the greatest gifts we can give our adult children is trusting them enough to become parents in their own way, even when their way isn't exactly ours. Grandma can have wisdom. Grandma can absolutely have opinions. Grandma just doesn't necessarily need to issue a press release every time she has one. So tell me what you think. Leave me a comment later. If you see this on the replay, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe for me, okay? When should grandparents speak up about how their grandchildren are being raised, and when should we lovingly mind our own business, you guys. Let me know. Do me a favor, go check out my besties over at Tuber Chat because they are amazing and we love them. Word up. I'll buzz you guys later. Thanks for being here.
I want to take a minute to shout out Tuber Chat. If you're a creator who's tired of surface level advice, and actually wants to understand how YouTube works, that's the space. It's real conversations with real creators who are in the trenches building channels, testing ideas. No posturing, no gatekeeping, no fake guru energy, just people sharing what's working, what isn't, and why. If you're serious about growing, learning, and not doing this alone, check out Tuber Chat. The link is in the description.
A boss be right.